From more crazy fights at weddings to juicy details missed in the show, this is how House of the Dragon is different from the books. The new TV show called House of the Dragon is based on a book by George R.R. Martin called Fire and Blood. The book tells the story of a family called House Targaryen, who ruled over a place called Westeros a long time ago. It talks about important events, like when they first took over, and a big war called the Dance of the Dragons. The TV show centers on that fight and what happened before it, like how two princesses didn't get along. But like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon changes things from the book to make it work better for TV. Sometimes changes can be good and actually improve the story. The changes in House of the Dragon not only have to do with how the story is told, but which characters are left out, and more. Here are some of the biggest changes they've made so far. In Fire and Blood, the person writing the book, Gildain, talks about where he got his information from. And when he writes about the Dance of the Dragons part of the story, he talks about how he had to use different sources, similar to what the three wise men and other religious figures did thousands of years ago. Gildain even had to rely on a jester named Mushroom. Mushroom stories were often the wildest and most outrageous. And even though House of the Dragon doesn't include characters like Mushroom, it'll be interesting to see which version of events the show decides to tell, especially for parts of the story that were unclear in the book. When you adapt a book into a TV show, you get to add new things to make things more exciting. Fire and Blood doesn't give a lot of details about certain events, so House of the Dragon takes creative liberties with new scenes that weren't in the book. Even though people who read the book already know what happens in the story, they won't be able to guess everything that's going to happen in HOD. In the first episode of House of the Dragon, two important things happen. King Viserys and Queen Aemma have a baby boy, and there's a big celebration. And while there's fights happening at the same time, we see how hard it is for Aemma to give birth. This reminds us that having a baby is really tough for women. The show brings together the birth and the party, even though they didn't happen at the same time in the book. This works because we get to see the similarities between them, and it's fun to watch the clashes at the big party. While in the book, Aemma's death during childbirth is certainly tragic. The show takes things up a notch by throwing a tough choice in the mix, forcing the king to choose between his wife and new baby. That's right, King Viserys is forced to make a decision that will change the course of his life forever. And to make matters even more intense, the childbirth scene is set against another action scene, raising the stakes and keeping viewers on the edge of their seats. What's great is the show is using the book to add more details to the story. House of the Dragon starts out by focusing on the friendship between two princesses, Rhaenyra and Alicent. This was a great idea, because later on, they end up having a massive falling out that kicks off the Dance of the Dragons. In the book Fire and Blood, the princesses aren't very close until later on, but in the show, they're best friends from childhood. This adds more drama and tension to their fights later on, which makes the show even more exciting to watch. At the end of the first episode, King Viserys tells Rhaenyra about a dream their ancestor Aegon had. In the dream, a big winter comes that brings danger to the world. This is a new part of the story that's not in the book. Speaking of King Viserys, in House of the Dragon, he chooses to marry Alicent Hightower, just like in Fire and Blood.
Marry the Lady Alicent Hightower before Spring's End.
In the book, though, we don't hear much about Alicent from the time she was a companion to the previous king to when she married Viserys. Some people, like Mushroom the Jester for example, say she had relationships with other people. But the show doesn't address this point at all. Her father, Lord Otto Hightower, tells her to try and make Viserys like her more. Alicent doesn't like the idea, but still tries to be nice to Viserys. This shows fans that Alicent can be sneaky, knows how to manipulate people, and was always going to cause problems with her former childhood friend Rhaenyra at some point. In episode 4, Rhaenyra tries to protect herself by telling King Viserys that Alicent's father Otto is conniving and wants more power. Viserys believes Rhaenyra and gets rid of Otto. This is different from what happens in Fire and Blood. There, Viserys gets rid of Otto for trying to make Alicent's son the heir to the throne. In the end, King Viserys was forced to decide who to believe, his brother, his daughter, or his friend. By the end of the episode, he ends up believing bits and pieces of all their stories. He thinks Rhaenyra and Daemon had a relationship, but also feels that Lord Otto is too untrustworthy to keep around, and only wants power for himself. For fans, watching this added segment not found in the books was a real treat. Episode 5 gives us even more to look at. Rhaenyra and Laenor have a wedding, which is a lot like the weddings in Game of Thrones. Of course someone dies on the big day. Joffrey Lonmouth, Laenor's secret boyfriend, who he's having an affair with, he teases Kristen throughout the wedding, and tension slowly builds over the course of the evening. Kristen was already in no mood, because Rhaenyra had already turned down his proposal to run away and get married. In Fire and Blood, Kristen kills Joffrey in a completely separate fight, for a completely different reason. And not at the wedding over petty arguments. But by this point in the season on the show, there's already been a pretty massive fight scene. So it makes sense for writers to find a new place to move the fight to instead. And to make things even more dramatic, they chose the wedding. One thing the show does better than the book is explaining why Kristen wants to kill Joffrey. Something we can all look forward to in the next season of House of the Dragon is the large-scale war, the Dance of the Dragons. At the end of the season finale, it's clear that Rhaenyra is ready to fight back against the Greens. And in the next season, Jacaerys will head north to Winterfell and ask for help. But the South will still be left in chaos. The relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent is going to be a main factor in the war. The show has spent a lot of time making their relationship interesting. So it's clear writers will want that back and forth to continue fighting with each other and amping up the scenes. It's unlikely that they'll make up anytime soon, given everything that's happened. House of the Dragon is a great show that takes on the challenge of adapting a fantasy story with a lot of gray areas. The friendship between Rhaenyra and Alicent is well developed and adds humanity to the characters, especially Alicent. The show expands on important moments from the book, bringing certain scenes front and center. Not everything in the show works, like the focus on Aegon's prophecy and the timelines that jump around, which has left many fans and critics alike feeling a bit confused. Overall, though, House of the Dragon is a great adaptation that really fleshes out the characters and their stories. Over 10 jam-packed episodes, the show's already been renewed for a second season, so we can expect more great dragon action in the future. So, from more crazy fights at weddings to juicy details missed in the show, this is how House of the Dragon is different from the books.